For our next presentation, I'm very happy to introduce Patti Solis Doyle, who is the former campaign manager for Hillary Clinton's 2008 campaign, her presidential bid, and the first Hispanic woman to lead a presidential campaign in the United States. Patti Solis Doyle, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so pleased to celebrate International Women's Day here with you all. This lunch, this forum gives voice to those women who are voiceless, and for that reason, I am really privileged to be here. Today's conference is dedicated to the notion that one of the best ways to defeat extremism is to elect more women leaders. Well, I have spent most of my 25 years in politics doing just that, and I couldn't agree more. Like everyone in this room, I have followed the news in Iran. I've read about the acid attacks in Isfahan and the senseless execution of Rahani Jabari. I've heard of the horrible acts of violence against women encouraged by mullahs who believe that walking down the street without your hijab is a sin worse than murder. When I read about these attacks and I hear about the other atrocities that Professor Hughes described in her remarks, I am horrified. But really, I am not discouraged. First, I share NCRI's faith in the Iranian people. Second, I agree with Maryam Rajavi's conviction that women's equality is indistinguishable from the fight for global peace. And third, I have been lucky enough to work with and for some of America's most powerful women. I've seen them use their positions in Congress, in the cabinet, and in the media, and in business to change America. Women like, Senator Barbara Mikulski, the longest-serving woman in Congress, Madeleine Albright, our first woman Secretary of State, and Debbie Dingell, one of our newest congresswomen. I've seen how gender roles in our fight for equality have influenced nearly every campaign and legislative battle, and I have been thrilled to watch women advanced as voters, staffers, candidates, and elected officials. Of course, I was lucky enough to learn from the absolute very best, Hillary Clinton. My proudest moment working for Hillary was 20 years ago today, well, not today, but around this time, when Hillary traveled to the International Women's Conference in Beijing. There, she called for the end of female circumcision in Africa and the child sex trade in Asia. She condemned mass rape, forced sterilizations, and coerced abortions. She called for laws allowing women to own their own businesses. As obvious as those truths may seem to us today, they were considered radical at the time. Some national security experts argued that stories like Rehena's are unreliable, or that the diplomatic situation is simply too complicated to allow for a real debate on human rights. Some argue that economic interests matter more than human rights, without realizing that they are ignoring the economic interests of half the planet. Some of Hillary's biggest critics were quote-unquote pro-family advocates who argued that Hillary's speech might demean the institution of motherhood. Ending female circumcision and forced abortion didn't strike me as radical anti-family agenda, but Hillary's critics in the U.S. didn't wait to hear her speech before they denounced it. A month before Hillary left for Beijing, an organization called Focus on the Family sent letters to 2 million American families denouncing the conference as the most radical, atheistic, and anti-family crusade in the history of the world. Imagine that. In a world where the leading cause of death among women 14 to 44 is domestic violence, these people were worried that talking about women's rights could demean motherhood. In the end, at the end of that conference, 180 countries came together and agreed on a platform of action for the full participation of women and girls in political, economic, civic, cultural, and social lives. Thanks to the work of those women's attitudes were changing. Events like the one here today and the commitment they inspire can overcome the doubters and the special interests against us. It just takes time. Yes, we have seen the brutality and sheer barbarity of fundamentalist forces that are ravaging the Middle East, Africa, and other parts of the world. It hit home for us again here in America when USAID worker Kayla Jean Mueller was murdered by ISIS. But I don't lose faith. I don't lose faith because I have been around long enough to see the work of Hillary Clinton, Madeleine Albright, Senator Mikulski, and Madam Rajavi. They have loud voices. I understand that there is a momentum behind what they do and by what you are doing here today. Gains in economic power lead to gains in political power, which in turn lead to even more economic gains. In Tunisia, Yemen, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan, and yes, Iran, women are gaining power. The Women's Freedom Forum reports on acid attacks are terrifying, but the response they have generated around the world is causing some Iranian officials to deny the mullah's reasoning, creating a symbolic break between religious extremists and the government that supports them is an important first step. We can also use technology to share Wahena's story or deliver Madam Rajavi's stirring words. I'm not an expert on social media or human psychology, but I believe that positive stories are more powerful than hateful ones. I believe that role models do matter. Schools for girls, microcredit loans that help mothers support their families, real economic development. These are powerful forces, capable of building on one another in one country and creating examples for women in another country. I believe in these forces because I have seen them work throughout my professional life. I am committed to this cause because I am a daughter and I am a mother. Let's dedicate this International Women's Day to Rahena, and thank you very much.